Howdy Rockstars, I'm Lid Shaw. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. And in this video, I want to give you a quick look at some of the new features that have just come out with the new iZotope RX11, which is just out now. So let me jump in here and give you guys a quick look at some of this stuff. We'll start out, we're already inside RX11, and let's pull up this window, which is called What's New. And it's going to give us a little bit of, it's like a helper assistant from iZotope from RX that is going to give us a look at some of the features that are in the newest version. So you can see here, the first one that they list, I guess there's 1 out of 9. So there's 9 new things they want to tell you about. The first one is called Dialogue Isolate. And Dialogue Isolate has received major processing improvements for removing noise and now can also remove reverb from your dialogue or voice recordings. And if you look here, I've actually got it pulled up as well, and you'll see that it's got features like a voice adjustment level, a reverb level adjustment, and noise level adjustment. So we'll be able to take a look at how that works with some vocal tracks, some voice tracks, and things like that, and see what the effect is. Then next, we go to Spectral Editor ARA. So Spectral Editor ARA now features more processing from RX and is available for Logic Pro if you're in Rosetta mode, with additional host support on the way. So if you are working with a tool like Pro Tools like I am, then you can feel confident that they are going to be delivering that very soon. So if you get RX 11 now, then when Pro Tools ARA comes out, that should be included with it. I believe that's what's happening. So ARA gives you the ability to load up RX inside a session, inside your DAW, where you don't have to export the files out over to RX and bring them back in. But the way it works in Pro Tools now is you can use the send to iZotope, send to RX plugin, and then you can just select a region of audio or a clip in your Pro Tools session, send it over to RX, do some work on it, send it right back. It's pretty smooth and pretty elegant. It works great already. But this will be cool to have the ARA feature in there where you can just load stuff right up in there, immediately deal with it, and see what you think about the sound while you're inside your mix. So very cool. All right, moving on to the next one, number 3 out of 9. Get the most of your audio masters with Loudness Optimize, an unprecedented approach for controlling the LUFS algorithm to maximize perceived loudness. So this is a very, very cool feature that essentially helps you make sure that when a app, particularly when a streaming service looks at your finished piece of audio, your mix, and says, all right, we're going to do a measurement of the loudness LUFS for this particular song. If your song shows up as louder, then the streaming platforms will have likely turn it down to whatever their target level is, like -14 dB. But sometimes it may be as simple as a balance of, because it's measuring the whole song, it may be as simple as a balance of the quieter sections against the louder sections in your song. And if your quieter sections are so low that they go below a particular measurement threshold, which you can see in this window here. And let me see if I can pull that one up too, and we can look at it. I actually haven't messed with this one yet because it's a little more, here we go, Loudness Optimize. So you'll see here, this is what it looks like. And it's already measuring this audio that I've got. This is a threshold setting. And when you have a threshold, oh, that's the ratio. Sorry, I'm messing with different parameters. Sorry, threshold is right there. Let's see. Depending on the threshold, the loudness, again, I can't give you the expert explanation on this, but just the outline. Depending on a threshold, the streaming platforms and the LUFS measurements will ignore certain bits. Like, in other words, they don't want to consider silence and stuff in between breaths because, you know, you're not trying to measure digital black. You just want to measure the the presence of the real signal so you can tell how loud a track is. And by using this tool, you can dial in your finished mix, your mastered mix, such that your quieter sections, you can spot check them and make sure that they all fall just above the threshold relative for the measuring, so that when it measures your whole track, it sees the quiet parts and it sees the loud parts, and therefore gives you a more accurate perspective on an average of all those things. In other words, if you had a track and it was ready for upload to streaming and all it saw was the loud stuff, it might say, whoa, your song's really loud. We should turn it down. When in fact, maybe your song has a bunch of quiet parts in it too. And if it saw those quiet parts, it would come up with a lower number and allow your song to stay turned up a little louder as it plays back off the streaming. So in my understanding, this is something that mastering has been aware of already. So this isn't like a brand new hack, but I think this is a new hack for us inside RX and having the ability to sort of check it before we finish it. So again, I hope that's not too confusing, but essentially we're trying to get a more accurate reading of the LUFS loudness volume of our finished song so that when we upload it to streaming, it turns it to, if it turns it down only the right amount so that when it plays back among other songs, our track sounds loud and proud and awesome. So, all right, so let's move on to the next one. That one's a little bit more advanced. I don't really have a demo ready to show you, but there are some iZotope videos that will show that off too. So those do exist out there if you want to explore that further. All right, so here's number 4. Make sure your music sounds great on all streaming platforms. Apply streaming preview to hear your song how the rest of the world will hear it. So another one that's going to help with streaming. Let me see where it is. Streaming preview. I have the advanced version of RX, so I have all the different modules. Depending on which version you get, you may get different modules added to your version. So you'll have to double check that at their website. So this streaming preview will let me set the playback loudness target left. So for example, if it was a YouTube or a Spotify or an Apple Music, it might be set to -14, for example. And then you can set what quality of audio you want it to play back at. So maybe you're just trying to check how's it going to sound when somebody's streaming this off the internet and it's coming back at 192 MP3 or one of the lossless. Well, I guess that wouldn't exactly be lossless, but one of the downgraded file formats. Then you can also pick which codec you want, and what it's going to do is it's going to, so you could be listening to it as an MP3 or an OGG, AAC, Opus, I don't know what that one is, and lossless, which is no change whatsoever. So it'd be essentially a WAV file. And this will let you hear what your song's going to sound like when it plays back off streaming with those new algorithms applied to it that the streaming services will do. So that gives you a peek inside, the future of your song when it's on streaming between those two last plugins we did, the loudness optimize, making sure that it's optimal sounding, and then the streaming preview. So if you work with those two in combination, you can get a really good sense of what your song is going to sound like when it actually goes out into the real world. So that's very cool. All right, moving on to number 5, better by popular demand. Music Rebalance has all new processing for improved separation with less artifacts and comes with a new UI, new user interface, and improved UX. So that one is very cool. Excuse me, my headphones are on a little tight here. Let's go to that one. That is the Music Rebalance. Let me pull up that one so you can see what the module looks like. And you essentially have control over the individual elements that are already baked into a finished track. So if you've done a mix and it's a complete mix, using Music Rebalance, you now have the ability to go in there and further adjust the levels of the vocal, the bass, the drums, and the other elements that are in there, like stereo guitars and keyboards and things like that. So it's a very, very cool tool that gives you one last opportunity to adjust the level and sound of stuff. And we'll get into how this one works, but you can also, you'll notice it also has mute buttons and solo. So that means you can actually use this to extract stems for a sound. You can extract the individual sounds. You could pull a vocal out of a finished mix and use it for a remix or something like that. Or you can pull the drums out and you know, create some sort of breakdown. And we'll take a look at that and see how it sounds here in just a moment too. All right, moving on. Number 6, Repair Assistant has been upgraded with our latest machine learning DSP to provide better repair suggestions as it listens to your audio. So Repair Assistant is this button up here on the top right. I know you don't see all the buttons on my screen because I've got it zoomed in so that you can see this description here, because unfortunately I can't move that window on this. But here's what Repair Assistant looks like. It will let you, it uses the whole iZotope feature of having an assistant, whether it's a mixing assistant or mastering assistant or repair assistant. And you can use this button and you can learn the audio, and then it's going to set all these knobs and settings for you to give you a great starting spot for making your dialogue or music sound better. So you've got up here at the top, you've got optimizes for, here, let me pull that back up. Okay, I got to hover over it. Oh, there it is. Optimizes signal chain for vocal processing, or hover here and it's optimized the signal chain for musical instrument processing. So that's very cool. All right, well, we'll look at that in a sec too. Number 7, Dialogue Contour has new controls and now learns the pitch curve of your audio, which updates as you make changes. So let's see if we can find that one. Dialogue Contour. All right, if I pull up this module, what it's going to do is it's going to let me load dialogue into it, and you see it measures, it quickly sees the pitch of the audio in the voice. And then you can actually, look at that, you can actually adjust it if you wanted to. See that? You're actually changing the pitch of the audio. So this is a little more advanced and probably something you're more likely to want to use in a film production where you really need to have matched dialogue. Maybe you added another part in there and you're trying to make sure it matches the previous stuff that you had in there. It could be the same thing if you had to go punch in vocals on a song production and somehow the voice just didn't seem like it was matching the other voices. Same thing with podcast production. I've had to do things where I go in there and change a word out because either I got it wrong or something changed later. And it can be tricky to make sure that the new word you're inserting into some dialogue matches the other stuff. So this is a very cool that's going to let you do things like that. You can change the pitch, you can change the smoothing and the formant scaling, and that basically lets you, here's the pitch right here, here's the formant, which is like changing your voice up here to Mickey Mouse or dropping your voice down low like that, right? And then variation is also like how much variation. If you increase it, you'll see at the top there, it makes the pitch curves go wildly more exaggerated. Bring it all the way down and it's going to sound like a monotone without any pitch changes and everything like that. So it's a very cool new feature. All right, so moving on to number 8. Number 8, boom. Access newly added audio devices without having to quit and restart RX. Simply refresh the audio device list in the preferences for an up-to-date scan. Okay, cool. That seems like that's probably a handy thing to have around, a little bit more esoteric of a use case. Just sometimes you're switching audio interfaces and you just don't want to have to restart the app, it sounds like. So that gives you a little more flexibility there. Midside display. Okay, now this is a really cool one. Go to view channel mode to select the new mid-side display mode for editing your audio with additional precision. So that, I forgot which one it is. Is it transport? It's view, right? Channel mode. Here you can switch from left, right to mid-side mode when you're working on audio. So that's very cool. And you'll see on my screen, in fact, I can go back out into the the full screen view now. And you'll see that I now have on the top there, I've got the left channel, and on the bottom I have the right channel. And if I go to view, channel mode, switch it to mid-side, now the top channel is the center mono information, and then the side channel down here on the bottom is only stuff that is just showing up in the side. So it's basically the bottom channel shows whatever is different between the left and the right speakers. If that's a little confusing sounding, then just know that Midside is another way to show you stereo information, where you're just saying, hey, what is mono? Hey, what is stereo only? So you can adjust them. You can essentially have more control over the sides of your sound. And the reason that this one particular here just shows up in the top only is it's showing you that because it's a mono sound. If I was to switch to one of these other ones, you'll see that there's information at the top, which is the mono component of this particular sound. And then down on the bottom, much smaller, in fact, is the side information. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And I'll see if I can solo this to you so you can hear them. In fact, why don't I just do it now since we're on this module? All right. So if I click on this left-hand side here, then that should enable just the mid channel. And if I play this, you're going to hear, or never mind, I just selected. So if I select across here, it looks like it's selected both the mid and the sides. If I press play, you should hear a stereo sound of audio.
I'm not gonna sit down, shut up, wear a smile, be polite.
Okay, so you hear there's a voice in the middle, and then there's some sounds like maybe there's water or rain and some reverb that's showing up in the stereo channels. If I click on the M and press play, we should hear just what's in the middle, just up the center.
I'm not gonna put up, shut up, don't.
Okay, so that was just the mid. Now if I click down here, I think I have to click it twice. Yeah, and then that makes the mid go away. Now we should only be hearing the sides. Now just know this. Sides, are they always out of phase? I guess they're not necessarily. A lot of times the side information is an out of phase signal that gets added and subtracted from the mid in order to bring it back to stereo. So probably when I play the sides, yeah, in fact, I'm certain of it. I think when, how's that for confidence? When, if you were to hear this back, if I'm playing the sides and I'm hearing it in stereo because I'm listening to stereo, but you happen to be listening back on a mono thing, you should actually hear nothing, I think, because they would sum together and cancel out. Okay, cool. So you only hear the reverb in that case. So that gives you a little bit more ability with this mid-side feature to extract center information, but get rid of things like reverb, or get rid of center information and only be left with the reverb. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let me see here. Let me go back to number one, and we'll start taking a look at how this works on some examples. All right, so let's begin with dialogue isolate. And hopefully I can keep all of this on the screen all at once. Let's go to this haunted house one, which you'll notice in mid-side mode. It's just mono to begin with. And let me pull up dialogue isolate, this module. I'll set this over here, and we'll select some of this in the middle. Guess we can select that much right there. And let's just hit play and let's see what does this voice sound like. What are we starting out with? So right now I'm just playing back our source audio, what we're beginning with. This is a clip of somebody talking about a haunted house.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then when we got to the door, he just ran right through. So tradition.
Okay. So you notice it's like a voice, but you hear the room and the echo of the space around it. So if you're doing something where you want to get rid of some of that reverb, then you can use this dialogue isolate plugin. And you'll notice that we've got three different settings on this. We've got the voice level, we got the reverb level, and the noise level. And then we have also sensitivity down here, which if you read, a lot of times iZotope gives you these nice tooltips. Here, let me scoot this over because I realize I might be covering it. So you click on this, and then it gives you a little bit of a description of what that is. So it says, biases the separation algorithm to treat more signals as reverb or noise. So in other words, as you turn this slider up, it's going to consider more of the sound to be reverb or noise. And if you turn it down, then it's going to be more picky and choosy about what it's calling reverb or noise. So then we have a preview button and a bypass button. Render for when we've decided we like it and we want to hit render, and then it'll actually process this selection that I've just done. And then compare, which does a cool thing where it's going to let us do a few different tries of something and then flip between them to compare which one we like. So let's try starting out. We'll just start out like this. We'll start out with nothing at all, and I'll hit the compare button, and it should do nothing. It should sound like our original sound. So if I hit compare, you'll notice it pulls up this window over here. And what it's doing is this little block down here is the processing happening. And it's processing this much audio, and it's putting it down here on this line as a sample that we can hear. And then when that line goes away, it's ready. Okay, great. And then if I click on them, if I click at the top here, I can listen to the original audio. And if I click on here, then I'm getting these first settings, which should sound pretty much the same as the original audio. Now let's go, what we'll do is we'll try a few different settings here. And let me see what the default, okay, default is 5. Is it really? Okay, maybe I'll back this guy off a little bit. I'm going to start out at like 3 for sensitivity, because sometimes if it thinks too much of the sound is reverb or noise, then when you try and take it out, you're going to be taking out other parts of the sound that you don't want. So I'm going to default to a little less sensitive. All right, so let's start by bringing the reverb down to -24, and we'll hit render and see what that sounds like. Now I'm going to point something out. There is a preview option here where you can click preview, and I'll show you what that does. It starts playing the audio, and it basically, you see this red line that goes forward, and that is, it's sort of like pre-processing a little bit. But what happens is the playhead catches up to the red line, and then you lose sound, and then it has to like send the red line ahead and then play up in the pre-processed audio. So it can be helpful, but it's a little bit start and stop for demonstration purposes, which is why the compare settings are more useful. But here's what preview does when you try it out for yourself.
Kind of weird tradition. Their
See how it stopped? And then
house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
see how it does that? So it like scoots ahead.
The first year my brother and I went, he promised to.
But it does give you a sense of what things sound like. And there's one other thing I want to point out too. When you use the preview mode, first you hear a little bit of the unprocessed sound. It's like pre-roll before it gets to your selection. And then you hear the process sound kick in. And at the end, same thing. Like you'll hear your process selection, and then it'll spill over, and that's a post-roll setting. And I forget whether that's just a preference setting in RX or if that's part of this feather sound feature. But just if you hear that, don't be confused by a snippet of reverb and then it gets cleaned up, or it's clean sound and then you hear the snippet of reverb again. But let me go and we'll do this compare. So basically we're taking this lower reverb setting and we're throwing it down here on settings number 2, and it's doing its thing where it's got to process that and finish it out. So we'll give it just a sec for it to finish the process. It doesn't take too terribly long. I mean, it can take longer if you're doing a full bit of audio, but I figured for this demo, I'm just doing like a segment of audio. Then let's go up here and let's try bringing the noise down. We'll do a little less. I feel like noise adjustments, depending on the kind of noise that's in there, is the sort of thing that you might want to be a little conservative with. Just do the least amount you can to remove noise. Otherwise, you can start to hear an effect on the voice. So this is the noise down 12 dB, hitting the compare button. It's processing that. That's going to be number 3 on there. I'll do my best to keep track. The beauty is when you're not sure which one of these settings was what, because you see it's just called settings 1, settings 2, settings 3, you can actually say view settings here at the bottom of the compare window. And that gives you the ability to like recall that and go like, oh yeah, that's that one. That's that one that I did. All right. So then we'll do one more here where I bring down the reverb. I'll just do like 17.6 here and I'll hit compare one more time. And that's going to be the fourth one. And then we'll play those back and see what the differences in sound are. Again, it's pretty cool because I can play the original audio and then we can play settings 1, settings 2, settings 3, settings 4, and see which one we like the sound of the best. All right, cool. Thanks for being patient. I know you're dying to just hear how this thing sounds. So now I can hit this. Actually, what's cool is you can hit a preview button here in the compare settings window, but I think you also don't have to, because if I click on these different settings, you'll notice that you can see everything changes up here as well. So it's actually changing the audio and it's creating a track. Oh, it's interesting. It made a side track. Very interesting. I guess we'll find out what that did. Find out what that sounds like. Seems like we started out mono and it ended up stereo. So we'll find out what it did there. All right, so I'm going to play the original audio again.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares.
And reminder, I'm playing the compare settings area. Now we'll listen to settings 1.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares.
Okay, settings 1 was the one where we made no changes. And if you click view settings, you'll notice that the dialogue isolated, it popped back up to that level. So that way you can recall any one of these settings. Then let's go to settings 2. View settings, and this is where minus 24 dB of reverb.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then when we got to the door, he just ran right through. So,
and just a reminder, here's how much we started with.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand.
That's amazing, isn't it? All right. So it really brings the reverb down. Now here's number 3. And if I click view settings, what we did is we brought down the noise. And let's listen to that.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
okay, I don't know what that did. It threw the vocal over to the left side. So I don't know why it did that. All right, let's go to settings 4. Maybe we'll hear the same thing. Maybe that's why we're getting this phantom stereo stuff here on here. Let me press play.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went.
Weird. I don't know what that is. All right, so let's try. Let's go to our original audio. How do I do? Here, let me just zero this out here. Let me go to original audio. Oh, I wonder if I processed a different audio if I needed to start with original each time. Maybe that's what I did. Let me go to original audio and I'll try bringing down the reverb to minus 24 and the noise to minus 24. But I'm going to start with compare settings on original audio. Then I'll hit compare and let's see if that one creates a weird stereo or if that one is not. Because if I started with a pre-processed sound, maybe that would throw it for a loop somehow. Okay, you can see it's processing and it's just finishing up. And there's settings 5.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother.
Huh. Maybe it's just converting it. Interesting. All right, so if I click on this.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised.
Well, I don't know exactly why it's doing that. Let me go to channel mode left, right, and let me see how this one does it. So I go to original audio.
Like some kind of weird.
Okay. Oh, maybe it's because I had something solo to begin with.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
or maybe it was confusing the mid with the left side. So here is left, right.
Tradition.
So I switched view mode to channel mode left, right. So this is just sort of traditional stereo mode. I'm not doing any of the mid-side stuff. And I've started with original audio and I'm going to process it and I'm going to bring down the reverb and the noise. Let me go a little less too, just since, Or actually, let me do less on the noise, but more on the reverb. So I'll bring the reverb down to like -36. Whoops, and I hit render. Okay, this time I'm actually rendering it, and then we'll just listen back in position, and I can use the undo to hit it. So that is one thing to know about the compare. If you accidentally hit render instead of compare, it ditches the compare window, and then it actually renders the audio. So here's, I backed up a little bit. Here's with the reverb, and then it should go into the lower reverb as soon as it hits. So you're going to hear like this first phrase is the old sound, and then once it gets past the first phrase, it starts playing our processed audio, which will have less reverb.
It was like some kind of weird tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then we got to the door, he just ran right through.
And there it went back to the
I
reverb.
went in on my own.
So that's pretty amazing that it does such a good job of getting rid of reverb. I guess I don't know what the deal was with the left side. I might have been using it wrong, or maybe it's just a bug that's about to get fixed, but we'll find out.
It was like some kind of weird tradition. Their house was like something.
Okay, cool. So now let's move on and listen to how this would work on some other audio too. So we're still on the dialogue isolate, and let's go to this one. It's another example.
I'm not gonna sit down, shut up, where.
Okay, so this is more of like sung vocals, and you've got that stereo sound in there and everything. And the, one thing I'm noticing is depending on how you click, you can just be focused on the left or just on the right. So you got to be a little bit careful of that. Now there is a way to, I forgot where the setting is. There is one that will change it so you're only seeing one image instead of a separated left and right, because I don't really need separated left and right. Spectrogram settings, channel mode. Oh, show channels separately right there. So if I do this, now it just shows like one channel of the stereo audio. So I find that a little more useful for working. So let me do it like this. All right, so now let's try doing the same thing. We'll just click on the reverb and the noise, and we'll extract it, or we'll just we'll hit compare, and we'll see what happens. All right, so there it is. It's processing that much audio. And then we will listen to the original, and then we'll listen to this reverb down, noise down version and see what it sounds like. Well, the reason why compare is so cool is because a lot of times with this stuff, I have found myself like trying lots of different tweaky settings, looking for the perfect combination, because it's a little bit of it's just the nature of how it works that the algorithm sometimes works slightly different in different situations, and you may want different settings. It's not like a one size fits all for everything. So it's great to be able to process a bunch, 4 or 5 different versions, and then flip through there and pick the one that you like the best in the end. So here's original audio. I'm going to play that back.
Brought me up at the dinner table, I won't have anything to argue about.
All right, and then here's the filtered one.
Brought me up at the dinner table, I won't have anything to argue about. I'm not gonna sit down, shut up, wear a smile, be polite. I'm not gonna.
And I think you can maybe flip between them. Let's press play and then just flip back and forth as we go and see if this works.
Brought me up at the dinner table, I won't have anything to argue about. I'm not gonna sit down, shut up, wear a smile, be polite. I'm not gonna
so that reverb just go away.
Shut up.
That's cool. All right, so that could be very, very useful in certain situations. Then also, if you look over here, you notice you have a quality setting. So you can do good quality if you're trying to listen to stuff in real time. And then you can do best quality, which is what we're using right now. And it's recommended to use that offline. Offline essentially means what we're doing with the compare, where we process first, then listen, as opposed to when we, if we wanted to hear something in real time, using this preview button, we might put it in the good real-time setting right there. All right, so let's move on. Let's go to another voice, and we'll see what this one sounds like.
On the spot, think outside the box, think creatively, team build, and all those things that we need in our real lives as well.
Okay, great. Let's try this one. Let's go compare Let's bring the noise down more because this one is definitely noisy in the background. Let's try compare and we'll see what it does at this setting. And just to reiterate that again, like using the preview is great. You could use the preview mode and really adjust your settings as you go and try and find a sweet spot, keeping this guy in the good real-time version. And then once you find some settings you like, then flip it over to best offline and hit render or hit compare to throw it in the compare bin there. That'd be a way that I would use it. All right, so we'll listen, and then I'll just, you can already see how much it changed the image of the waveform there too, but we'll do audio original and then flip over to settings 1 while it's playing.
On the spot, think outside the box, think creatively, team build, and all those things that we need in our real lives as well.
That's pretty awesome. All right, cool. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of using dialogue isolate and how it could be useful. Now let's pull up, let's see what was next on the list here. All right, we're not going to do the ARA because I'm just inside RX right now. So you'll have to come back for that one. Loudness optimize and streaming preview. Those are ones we'll skip for now too. Those are a little bit more advanced. And I think you have to have like just the perfect example of a musical track where the loudness falls below the threshold in certain areas to really demonstrate that example. But the beauty is when you need it, you got it. And when you need it, you really need it. All right, so music rebalance is one we'll come to in a minute too. But let me go to this one, Repair Assistant, because we can use it on these vocal things so you can really hear what it does. All right, so Repair Assistant is, again, the automated way of getting a good starting place with the sound. So let's try this. So here again is this first one, the haunted house, and let's just press play and see what the original audio sounds like.
It was like some kind of weird tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
okay, so you hear that reverb in there. Now we can just hit learn up on the Repair Assistant, and you can see it's actually going through that and it's studying it, and it's coming up with the ideal combination of settings for a bunch of different modules to make sure that you end up with a sound that is better than where you started. So it's basically, it's set, I had it in voice mode, which it defaults to because this is a voice. And then it's going to pick settings for cleanup, which include a noise removal. There's a de-hum switch, which you can get rid of hum and like electrical signal and things like that. There's a de-click, which will get rid of clicks in the sound, and a de-reverb. So it's going to adjust that. There's a tone knob, which lets you then adjust the tone. You can tilt it. So you're tilting it more towards the highs or more towards the lows. And then I think scoop is more of a smiley face, where like you're boosting bass and highs or cutting bass and highs. Let me see if I can go to 0. Okay, great. And then there's a low cut if you want to just cut lows out of a sound. There's a high cut if there's too much high end and you just want to cut out and filter some of the top. And then there's this DS module, which is taking the S's and the sibilants and taming it, which is cool. So this is the spectrum of the sound, and I think this is sort of an EQ tilt possibly for that. As far as what kind of S's it's removing, how much it's going to do, whether they're slow or fast, this shows you the DS is being removed. You've got the ear knob, which is going to let you listen to just the S's being removed or listen to just the sounds being removed. And that helps you determine that you're not taking something out that you shouldn't have taken out. And then there's a declip module. If your audio was really clipping, this will go in there and try and smooth out some of the distortion for you and stuff like that. So now that it's done its suggested settings, let's see if we can hit preview on this one or if we need to do the compare again.
I did. It was like some kind of weird tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
okay, now if we want to compare the process of this versus the original, then we would hit this preview button and then we use the bypass button right next to it to keep it in the preview mode, but bypass the processing so we can just hear the original. So I'll hit preview and then I'll bypass in and out so you can hear before and after.
I did. It was like some kind of weird tradition.
Before?
Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
After.
the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then we got to
Before?
the door, he just ran right through. So I went in on my own.
After. Here's processed after again.
It was like some kind of weird tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your
We bring up
nightmares.
the
And
de-reverb.
the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then
Whoops. I'm sorry. It looks like I hit play. So that's one of the tricky things that I am always catching myself on. If I hit the space bar, like I'm used to in a DAW, I'm not actually listening to this because this is more like an Audio Suite plugin would be in Pro Tools. So I need to always remember to hit this preview button. And I forgot which of the key command is. It's like Option space or Command space will play the selection. Yeah, I don't remember what it is. Shift?
I did. It was like some kind of
Shift
weird
does it.
tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then
Okay, so I think the reason why we're having an easier time doing the preview listen with the Repair Assistant is because it's not as processing as intensive as the Dialogue Isolate one is, where you want to like put it in the high quality mode and stuff. But anyway, that's a quick look at this. So it's pretty cool, you know. Again, here's the before.
Then we got to the door, he just ran right through. So
And then here's
did.
with this on.
It was like some kind of weird tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went,
So that makes a big difference, right? All right, so let's jump over and we'll just listen to these other ones as examples too. So here's the original again.
Brought me up at the dinner table. I won't have anything to argue about.
And you'll notice there's like noise and stereo stuff, and it almost sounds like there's a loud wave in the right speaker that comes across with the voice. So a lot of things to clean up. Then we'll hit Learn. And we'll see what Repair Assistant does on this vocal track. This one's taking a little bit longer to think about. Oh, maybe I might have selected a lot, or maybe there's just a lot of information with the stereo that causes it to need to take another minute processing. All right, so now if I hit preview, here, or I'll try this shift spacebar, which will play the selection in preview mode.
Brought me up at the dinner table.
Okay, so this one, because it's having to do more processing, is dropping in and out. So let me try, let me do a little less of a selection so that we don't have as much to figure out. And we'll try, now that it learned it and figured it out, we'll do this compare. And we'll process it over to the side. And you'll notice that it chose not to remove any reverb. Interesting. So let me try doing another one where we remove, I don't know, 50% of the reverb and see what it does. So I compare again, and it's loading it up over on that little compare window. And now we can listen to original and the two different settings. So here's original.
Brought me up at the dinner table. I won't have anything to argue.
Number one.
Brought me up at the dinner table. I won't have anything to argue about.
Number two.
Brought me up at the dinner table. I won't have anything to argue about.
Pretty amazing, right? So, I mean, I hear the sound that it's doing to the voice in there. It's not going to like, it doesn't remove the reverb as if it was the same voice totally dry in a space, but it gets pretty close. And the thing to remember is when you're extracting voices, especially in the music world and especially in modern music, you might be extracting something that you're going to then manipulate a whole lot anyway. And so you're really just trying to get more control over that original source audio. You know, if you're doing remixes, maybe you want the voice to sound sort of like it was sampled and replayed back in a remix anyway. And so you can get that out of this RX and isolating the voice. So very cool. All right, so now let's go over and let's go to the thing you've all been waiting for, which is the Music Rebalance plugin. So let's go to Music Rebalance and let's go over to this song, which we have, and see what kind of results we get. All right, so again, we're in the left-right stereo mode. We'll skip the, I might show you Midside in just a moment, but for now we'll skip that. And I've pulled up the Music Rebalance module, and it's giving me things like access to vocal, bass, drums, and other. And let me just press play and so you can hear what the raw music that we're starting with sounds like.
Call me from the payphone, you're in a bathroom, begging for a chance, but I'm not gonna answer, you're on your own.
So you can hear it's kind of a programmed sound. You've got a voice in the middle, you've got stereo, background vocals and things happening, and effects that go out stereo from the vocal. Let's begin by just putting it to the straight up hard test. Let's just solo a couple of things on here and see what they sound like. Now, again, I think what you need to listen for is the ability to extract something that you can then reuse in a cool way, as opposed to thinking that you're going to get something that sounds like the original vocal just magically in the studio without any of the music added to it yet. Because I don't think that's quite what it does. But here's the solo. And so this should just isolate the vocal track. Now, underneath each one of these, we have a sensitivity knob. And if you hover over it, iZotope tells you what that knob does. So this says it biases the separation algorithm to treat more signals as vocal. So essentially that means if you turn the sensitivity up, it's considering more things to sound like a vocal. So it's going to include more stuff with the vocal when it's isolated. So in other words, if you crank this up, you're more likely to hear drums and other things sneaking into the voice. And if you crank it down, you'll hear only voice, but it's also you'll begin to lose parts of the voice because it'll say, oh, that must have been a percussion sound or something like that. Because it's interpolating the sounds from and extracting it from what it hears. So here's at the default setting. We'll hit preview here. Actually, let me just hit the compare button and let me do less of this so it doesn't take long. Original.
Call me from the payphone, you're in a bathroom, begging for a chance, but
Okay, great. And now we'll hit the compare button, and the compare button should give us an isolated vocal for that same stretch of sound. You can see it's doing its little processing down here. Oh, also I do have it set to best. So again, you can do good, better, or best. And we'll just see what best sounds like. But best, we're not going to get best in real time, but we can hit the process button to compare it. Now let me do, we'll keep the vocal soloed. We'll bring this back a little bit so that it's trying harder to get rid of everything that's not voice. And we'll do a compare of that. Most likely that number, the sensitivity at at 33 here is going to sound a little weird to us. It'll probably sound like it's taking too much out of the voice. And then we'll move the sensitivity up so that it's a little looser. We'll put it up at like 67. I find that these settings in and around the default tend to be the most useful here, as opposed to extreme settings like 0 or 100. But you're going to have to try them all probably. So let's hit compare here. And then this should be the vocal sounding a little more natural, but maybe there's going to be some other bits and elements trying to sneak into the vocal mic. You might hear some percussive elements of the drums or something like that. And we'll see what that does. And also on this one, I might show you some of the Midside stuff because that I found to be a little bit useful in getting rid of all the stereo information. So here's the original audio.
call me from the payphone, you're in a bathroom, begging for
Here's settings 1, which is vocal at default.
Call
Yeah, in fact, let me do the view settings so that you can see it up here on the plugin.
me from the payphone, you're in a bathroom, begging for a chance, but
So you definitely hear some stuff going on in there, but it's pretty cool how it's kind of like magic how it actually pulls the vocal out. Settings 2 is going to be even more picky. So I think it's safe to assume we're probably going to think this sounds pretty weird. Let's check it out.
call me from the payphone, you're in a bathroom, begging for a chance, but
So it kind of sounds underwater, but now, of course, if you were creating a weird breakdown effect, maybe you would just love that sound. All right, so now here's number 3, where we were less extreme about our settings. Let's see what that sounds like.
Pull me from playful. You're in a bathroom, begging for a chance. But
Great. And then I don't know whether we can go from here. I think if I do settings 3 and then adjust it again, it's going to process that one, I think. So let's go back to original. Let's bring this up and make it a little bit looser. We'll go to 70. We'll do a compare. And then we'll listen to how that one sounds. And maybe the vocal will even sound more natural. But again, we'll get like elements of other things sneaking in there. Let's see what we get here. All right, so here's settings 4, which is the 70 setting for isolating the vocal.
pull me from playful. You're in a bathroom, begging for a chance. But
Cool. All right, let's see what happens if we flip over to channel mode. Let's go. Let me go out of this now. So we'll ditch all those. Okay, I don't know why I can't get back to channel mode right now. So apparently I've done something wrong. It doesn't want to let me have the channel mode. Maybe I have to click. Maybe I have to undo the selection. Nope, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I got this window open. I don't know. Or maybe, yeah, I was using it before for music rebalance. Let me see if I close a couple of windows and reopen it, if I can get the channel mode back. No, I don't know what I did. I don't know. Oh, I know. It's because we're not viewing both sides. That's what it is. So if I go to show channels separately, then I can get into channel mode. That's what it is. All right, that helps. Whoops. Clicking it one more time. Channel mode, mid-side. And now we've got our mid and our side. So now I'm going to use the music rebalance. And I'm going to show you how this mid-side can be kind of useful. At least I thought it was kind of useful. Whoa. Our vocal got cranked up to 20. I don't know what that was. All right, so get it off my head there. Great. So here's original.
really wish I had. Pull me from playful. You're in a bathroom, begging for a chance. But
Whoops. Guess you got to get down here in the middle. I'm getting a little bit better at using the mouse in this RX. All right, so I've selected mid and side. I'm going to do the compare process. And this is the 70 setting. And what I want to show you is now it'll process the mids and the sides separately. And then we'll try and listen to just the mids so that you can hear how that helps isolate the vocal even more because it's getting rid of the stereo background vocals and information there. So pressing play, we're hearing both mid and side. We'll hear the full stereo first.
really wish I had. Pull me from playful.
And you can hear the drums are sneaking in a little bit, right?
For a chance. But
So you hear a little bit of that. Now, if I click on that guy, now we're just hearing the mid, not the side.
really wish I had. Pull me from playful. You're in a bathroom, begging for a chance. But
Pretty cool, right? And then also there's this thing called stem split, which I guess you just select it across everything and it's splitting into separate tracks. So I don't know, that might be something more interesting. Well, let's just see what it does. I haven't tried that yet. But let me turn this off. So we're back to our original. Let's just hit stem split and see what it does. Although I still had the vocal soloed, so. Also, I hope I didn't just start something that's going to take a long time to process. Nah, it's getting there. And then, like, where's it going to put all the audio? That's what I don't understand. Maybe it's going to export it to a folder or something like that. Yeah, I don't really know where to even put it. So that's my guess, is that maybe it's exporting those out to a work folder or something. So let me just stick with listening to here. I'm going to go back to not showing separate channels. And it looks like it defaults to left, right when you do that. And right, and then we can explore extracting the drums. We'll try that next. How's that sound? So selecting across a little section, hit play for the original. Great. Solo the drums, hit compare, and you can see it's processing. And we'll get hopefully a just drums sound there for a moment. Give it 1 second to finish doing its thing. Here it comes. It's coming, I swear. Here it is. It's almost there. Just goes to show how much crazy processing this thing is doing in the background to make all this magic happen. So if I press play here, you should hear just the drums. It's amazing. It's amazing that you hear kick and snare and even claps. But somehow it's able to figure that out versus vocals and other instruments. That's wild. All right, so let me go on to other, and we'll just see what happens if we hit compare and grab the other. I'm actually going to start from the drums and see if it goes back to the original or if it goes to or if it does it from the drum setting. Let's just see what it does. This time I'm soloing the other, but I didn't change the compare box back to original. I just left it on settings 1 option. Okay, it's almost done here. Here's the other. I think it went back to the original audio, so I don't think it matters which one of the compares are selected. There, you hear that? So it's picking up on all the stereo synth stuff, but it's also picking up on like, you know, guitar or piano stuff that's in the center. Awesome. So last but not least, let's see if I can remove these old ones. Okay, great. So here's our starting. So I'll show you how that's what you want to do if you're getting into remix stuff and you want to try and like pull stems out and that's your interest. If you're going to use this more of a mixing mastering context, then you're probably more interested in making slight adjustments because maybe you felt like you got as close as you could, but later you decided, the vocals just weren't loud enough in a mix or something like that. So let me show you how that would sound. So if you put this up, we can add, and I've done this in mastering situations, we can add 6.1 dB of vocals. So that's technically twice as loud, the vocals in the mix. And if I hit compare, you're going to get a mix. Now, this mix may have already been maxed out because it might modern. So it might have already been like, you know, peak levels. So boosting the voice a ton may actually create some overs. We'll find out. But this should give you now a mix that still sounds like the mix, but has the vocals 6 decibels louder. And even that's a lot, you know, like you may want to do a vocal up where really you just want 1 dB of more vocal. So now here's what that vocal sounds like. 6 dB louder. You can already see it in the blue. Look at that. If I go to original, you see how loud the mix is. Go to settings 1 and the mix is that much louder. Come back, really wish I had. Call me from the payphone. You're in a bathroom, begging for a chance, but I'm not gonna. Okay, so that could be really useful in certain situations. Now, again, if you're really using a keen ear, you might hear some changes to the sound and artifacts that you're like, well, that's not what I'm looking for. Like you may not want to do extreme moves when you're looking for something subtle. So let me try something subtle here, like, and then also, of course, the sensitivity. Remember, that was a big deal. So we can actually increase the sensitivity here because I think, what did we find? 70 was more 70 or like, yeah, we'll just do 70. That was more appropriate. And then let me set this to like 1 dB louder and we'll do a, whoops. See, I hit render by accident. All right, we'll just do that. We'll do, cause I'll use the undo button too. Or no, you know what? I'll just do it again. Cancel. All right, it's taking a moment to cancel too. There you go. Compare. So now I'm just taking that section and raising the vocal 1 decibel I adjusted the sensitivity a little bit so that it's not as picky, so that it recognizes more of the little details in the voice as being voice, because you want that. And then we'll compare the original mix with this one vocal up 1 dB. So here's original mix. And you know what? I'm going to just flip between the two as it's rolling so you can hear the difference. So original mix. 1 decibel up. Original mix. Oops. It's not that long. So, oops. Yeah. Original. 1 dB up. Original mix. So that may be too subtle if you're, watching this, on your phone or something like that on YouTube. But when you're actually finishing your record and you're getting into that mindset of like trying to make these smaller mastering adjustments, that is going to be just the difference you're thinking about. A lot of times you might be like, I just want 1 more dB of vocal level, and that I think would be good. Or 1 more dB of guitar level. So for example, you could bring up the sides. Let's try that. Let's go over to the sides. We'll leave the vocal at 0. And maybe I'll adjust the sensitivity of the sides, and we'll bring the sides up 3 dB. Let's see how that sounds like. All right, and then we hit compare. Now, it's like we're leaving the mix alone, but we're just bringing up that side information, all that stereo synths and keyboards and stuff like that, especially if this was a rock guitar thing and you felt like, you just need a little bit of a guitar boost. You might be something to experiment with. I mean, don't get me wrong. Still the best move always is to just get your mix exactly how you want it before you master it. But there are times where you just need this. You just need that extra help, and you don't have that ability to go back and make the other change. So these tools can be really useful. So I'll do original audio, and then I'll switch to settings 2, which would be louder guitars or louder keyboards. Okay, pretty subtle. So original. Louder. Original. Sides up. And now it might be bringing up the background vocals, which are also on the sides. It's a little hard to say whether it's, perfectly knowing the difference between the two. But that's basically the stuff you can do with this too. So you get that extra level of tweakability. Oh, look what it did. Here's our stems. Remember we were talking about that? We wondered where they went. It just throws them on additional tabs. So now we can check them out. This is cool. So you could set your sensitivity for each stem. Yeah, for some reason, I think I'd have to turn the sensitivity way up for bass. It just didn't identify the bass on that track. Not a very prominent bass part. It's not like a bass guitar where it's like, that's obviously the bass, probably more tucked in with the drums. Here's the drums. This is awesome, hilarious. And the instruments. So it's fascinating. It's just fascinating to see this tech sort of move forward with all these different features. Let's see if I left anything out there. I think I covered everything right. Dialogue isolate we looked at. We looked at Spectral ARA and the loudness stuff we talked about. Music rebalance, repair assistant we did. Dialogue contour. Let's quickly look at that. So let's go to haunted house because it's definitely got some, we kind of looked at it, but we can adjust it so that you can hear what it sounds like. So her voice goes up and down. Here's what her voice sounds like again, the original.
He promised to hold my hand, but then we got to the door, he just ran right through. So when you hear that, we got to the door, you can hear the pitch goes up, got to the door. So now let's mess with this and see what we get. So here's, you heard the original. Here's the original again. The first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand, but then we got to the door, he just ran right through. So,
all right, now if I bring the pitch down, let's hit preview and let's see if it can just handle it.
And The first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand. But then we got to the door, he just
Okay, so that sounds like a lot, right? So let's do I got some undos in here too. I'm not sure which one is which. Let's bring the pitch down a little bit. Actually, let's do the formant. Let's hear the formant. Bring the formant down some. We'll do compare again. So you can hear it over there. Oh, that was fast. So here's that same voice with the formant down a little bit.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand.
All right, there you go. No comment.
tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see.
Bizarre sounding, right? But you can really change the voice. You can change the quality. So let's bring the formant up a little bit and see what that sounds like.
Tradition. Their house was like something
Wow, and that's only 3.7. So you really, tiny bits go a long way. Here's just the tiniest bit up.
you would see.
tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And
then here's the variation. So if I do the variation way up, and I'll put the formant back at 0 and the pitch back at 0, it should exaggerate all those vocal changes. And then formant scaling, I wonder if that'll change with that too. But let's just do variation way up and hit compare. It's very quick, so that's one cool thing.
tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised.
All right, so obviously that sounds a little bit ridiculous to crank it. So let's try bringing this down to just a little bit more expression.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand.
All right, let's try less variation. So this should just flatten it right out. Now the thing about variation is it's like working in Melodyne or one of these things. You can flatten out the pitch, but you're still going to hear the changes in formant tone and the changes in the tonality. So you'll still hear something there, but you won't get the pitch changes. And when you're working with this tool, you're more likely to be working on adjusting a single phrase or a word in there to make it match other things, you know? So that's where it could probably be really useful. Whereas, of course, we're like slapping it across a whole section, which is less likely, I think, that you would do that. So here's less variation on her voice. That's number 6 here, and let's hear it.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand.
Okay, so listen to the first year my brother and I went. Original. Actually, let me go like this so we don't have to hear as much. I wonder if it'll play from here. Original.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your
All right, it wants to play the whole
nightmares.
thing.
And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand.
All right, and then on number 6, which is less variation.
Tradition. Their house was like something you would see in your nightmares. And the first year my brother and I went, he promised to hold my hand.
See how it makes her sound a lot calmer vocally? So that could be a really cool tool for the right situation where you just want to tone down somebody's excitement or you need to add a little excitement. All right, cool. So that was dialogue contour. And then what was this other one I just skipped past? Oh, the device handling, right. We don't need to mess with that, but we can look at it. If we went into preferences to audio, there you go. See this little circle button? That will refresh and find the new device if you needed to switch while you're working. So that could be handy. And then the last but not least was the mid-side display. Again, you would go into view, show channels separately, and then you can switch to mid-side like that. And in this case, this is a mono voice. So when you switch, you don't see any information there. And then I think there was a quick key for the show channel separately too, right? I call it Apple, Command-Shift-C. So there you have it. There's a quick look inside RX11. It's got some new features in there. There's a ton of great stuff that we didn't even talk about. Incredible tool. You can do amazing manipulation of sounds. You can pull stuff out of your mix, send it over to RX. adjust the EQ, the contour, clean up noise, remove sounds from it. If somebody drops a pencil in the middle of a take, you could go in there and remove that out of it and keep the take. If somebody, I watched Colin Dupuis when we did a mixing mastermind here at my studio, go into a background vocal where the other vocals were screaming through the headphones into the vocal mic, and he was able to remove those other vocal parts. A lot of work, but it's a way to clean up the sound of a voice in a recording and really get it dialed in a lot closer. So very cool stuff. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you can catch more from me. And if you've got any thoughts about iZotope and RX, please drop them in the comments. In fact, if you know what I was doing wrong when I got that first processing to sound like it was on the left, let me know and tell me in the comments below. And then if mixing is your focus and you're working on your music in your home studio, I've got a free gift for you called the Mix Master Bundle. It's my free mixing course. And that link is also in the notes and description of this video, as long as a link that will take you over to iZotope and RX11. And I've even got a coupon code in there so you can get a special discount of 10% off if you use our code. So check the description of this video and click through and go get started making some great records. Thanks so much for watching this. I'm Lidge. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.